My mother died 3 hours earlier. I stood in my kitchen holding a tray of hot food. My husband waited in the living room with his boss. He told me to hurry. He said tonight mattered more than anything. I told him my mother was gone. I said the words slowly. He did not ask how I was. He did not sit with me. He looked at the clock. He said his boss was arriving soon. He said I could cry later. I put on a black dress. It was the only one I owned. I walked into the living room and served drinks. My hands shook. I tried to keep my face still. My husband smiled and laughed. He spoke about his work. He acted proud. His boss watched me. He noticed my shaking hands. He noticed the dress. He noticed my eyes. I kept moving because stopping felt worse. I poured wine. I placed plates. I stayed quiet. My husband leaned close to me. He told me not to ruin this night. He said everything depended on it. I nodded because I felt empty. I felt like I had already lost everything. When I leaned forward to refill a glass, my necklace slipped out. It rested against my chest. His boss stared at it. His face changed. He asked me where it came from. I told him my mother gave it to me. I told him her name. The room went silent. His boss stood up slowly. He looked at my husband and said one sentence. "You have made a serious mistake." My husband laughed. He thought it was a joke. It was not. The room stayed silent. His boss did not sit back down. He asked me my mother's full name. I answered without thinking. My voice sounded flat. I felt far away from my body. He asked where she grew up. I said Easton County. I did not know why that mattered. My husband shifted in his chair. He tried to change the subject. His boss raised a hand to stop him. He stepped closer to me. He looked at the locket again. He asked when my mother gave it to me. I said when I was 13. I said she told me it belonged to our family. His face tightened. He took a slow breath. He asked if my mother ever spoke about leaving home. I said number one said she avoided her past. My husband laughed again. He said this was getting strange. He said his boss was reading too much into things. His boss did not look at him. He told me his sister disappeared 30 years ago. He said her name was Miriam. He said she left Easton County and was never found. He said their family searched for years. My chest locked. I could not speak. My husband stood up and said this was inappropriate. He said dinner was not the time for stories. His boss turned to him. His voice changed. It was calm but sharp. He said the locket was custom made. He said only one existed. He said it was made for his sister. I felt dizzy. I held the table to stay upright. My husband said this was impossible. He said coincidences happen. His boss said there were no coincidences left. He said my mother was his sister. He said I was his blood. My husband stopped smiling. Then his boss looked straight at him and said he knew exactly what kind of man he was married to. And he said this night was about to end very badly for him. My husband tried to laugh again. His voice sounded thin. He said this was emotional confusion. He said grief makes people imagine things. He reached for his boss's arm like nothing serious was happening. His boss stepped back. His face hardened. He said my husband had forced me to serve guests on the day my mother died. He said that alone was unforgivable. My husband said I agreed to help. He said I was sensitive. He said I liked attention. I stayed silent. I watched him dig deeper. His boss asked him one question. He asked if he knew my mother's name before tonight. My husband froze. He did not answer fast enough. That pause said everything. His boss turned to me. He said my mother vanished from their family after refusing an arranged marriage. He said she left with nothing but that locket. He said she rebuilt her life alone. My throat burned. I remembered how she avoided old photos. I remembered her fear of hospitals and paperwork. Things suddenly made sense. My husband interrupted. He said none of this mattered. He said blood meant nothing. He said careers mattered. He said money mattered. That was when his boss changed. He said my husband's promotion was canceled. He said his position was under review. He said the house we lived in belonged to his family trust. My husband asked him to stop. He said they could talk privately. He said this was going too far. His boss said no. He said this had gone far enough years ago. He said my mother was family. He said I was family. Then he said my husband was no longer welcome in his company, his home, or his presence. My husband looked at me, his eyes were cold. I saw fear behind them. He whispered that I would regret this. And in that moment, I knew this was only the beginning. No one spoke after that. His boss picked up his coat. He told the guests to leave. He said the evening was over. Chairs moved. Glasses clinked. People avoided my husband's eyes as they walked past him. My husband followed his boss to the door. He begged him to reconsider. He said this dinner meant everything. He said he worked for years for this chance. His boss stopped at the door. He said character matters more than skill. He said cruelty always shows itself. Then he left. The door closed. The house felt smaller. My husband turned to me. His face changed. The polite mask dropped. He asked what I had done. He said I embarrassed him. He said I destroyed his future. I told him my mother was dead. I told him I had not destroyed anything. I said he did this himself. He stepped closer. He said I owed him everything. He said without him I was nothing. His voice was low and sharp. There was a knock at the door. His boss returned with a man from his legal team. They entered without asking. My husband backed away. The lawyer said the house was owned by the Callaway Trust. He said my husband had no claim. He said effective immediately, my husband was required to leave. My husband shouted. He said this was illegal. He said I was manipulating everyone. His boss looked at me. He asked if I felt safe. I hesitated. My husband noticed. That hesitation changed everything. His boss told him to pack only personal items. He said security would return if needed. He said tonight was not a discussion. My husband stared at me. His eyes were filled with rage. He said this was not over. I watched him gather his things. I stood still. When the door shut behind him, the silence felt heavy. But it was not peace. It was the sound of something dangerous being set loose. 2 days later, I stood inside the church holding my mother's photo. Her face looked calm in the picture. I did not feel calm. The room was filled with quiet voices and soft music. My husband was not supposed to be there. The service had just begun when the doors slammed open. He walked in with a man in a suit. Everyone turned. The music stopped. My body went cold. He spoke loudly. He said the burial could not continue. He said there were legal issues. He said he had rights. The man beside him stepped forward. He said he was an attorney. He said my husband had signed authority over my mother's affairs years ago. He said until it was reviewed, the burial must pause. People whispered. I could not move. My hands shook around the program. His boss stood up from the front row. He told my husband to leave. He said this was a funeral, not a courtroom. My husband refused. He said he was protecting assets. He said emotions were clouding judgment. That word stayed with me, assets. The attorney showed papers. He said my husband had temporary control. I knew I never agreed to this. I knew something was wrong. My boss's voice stayed calm. He said those papers were outdated. He said they were misused. He said the burial would continue. 2 church staff members stepped forward. My husband argued. His voice grew louder. His face flushed. Then police officers entered. Someone had called them. My husband backed away. He stared at me. His look promised trouble. He left with the attorney, still shouting that this was not finished. The doors closed again. The room stayed silent. I looked at my mother's photo and whispered that I was sorry. I did not know what my husband was planning. But I knew he was desperate. And desperate people do dangerous things. After the funeral, I went to my mother's apartment. It was quiet. Her shoes were still by the door. I sat at the table and tried to breathe. His boss arrived later. He said we needed to review documents. He said my husband had been searching records for months. He said this was not sudden. He placed a folder in front of me. Inside were copies of forms with my name, medical consent papers, estate access requests, bank inquiries. I told him I never signed those. He nodded. He said my husband used old documents. He said signatures can be reused. He said control often starts on paper. My stomach tightened. I remembered how my husband pushed me to sign things without reading. I remembered him saying it was routine. His boss showed me another page. It was a land record. My mother owned property in Easton County. I had never seen it before. I said my mother told me it was worthless. I said she never spoke about land. He said that land was no longer worthless. He said a highway project was approved. He said the state would need it. He showed me a number. It was more money than I had ever seen. Then he told me my husband requested copies of this record months ago. He said my husband sent them to our shared address. Everything aligned too cleanly. The funeral disruption, the legal papers, the pressure. I felt cold. His boss said my husband planned to claim the land after my mother's death. He said that was why he wanted control so badly. I asked how far he went. His boss did not answer right away. Then he said there were financial records missing. He said loans had been opened. In my name. That was when I realized this was bigger than theft. It was a trap already closed around me. I returned to the apartment I once shared with my husband. The door was unlocked. That felt wrong. I stepped inside slowly. Everything was torn apart. Drawers were empty. Cabinets were open. My sewing machine lay on its side. Fabric was ripped. This was not anger. This was searching. I walked toward the kitchen. Envelopes were scattered on the counter. All were addressed to me. I opened the first one. It was a debt notice. I opened another, then another. My balance dropped with each page. Loans, credit lines, interest warnings. The total made my head spin. I had never applied for any of this. I found a document clipped to the last letter. It showed my signature. It looked real at first glance. It was not mine. The strokes were wrong, the spacing was off. I recognized my own name. I searched the apartment. In a drawer, I found an old medical consent form I signed years ago. The signature matched the loans. He reused it. My legs gave out. I sat on the floor. My hands shook. Then I found a bank statement. Transfers had been made out over months, large amounts, all sent to one place. A business account. The name stopped me. It belonged to a salon. I recognized it. My husband mentioned it once. He said a friend owned it. I searched the name online. Photos appeared. A woman stood in front of the building. Her hand rested on his arm. That was when I understood. He did not just plan to steal from my mother. He already stole from me. And he used my life to build someone else's. The door creaked behind me. I turned, expecting him. But the apartment was empty. I knew he would come back. And next time, he would not come quietly. The next morning, I went to the salon. I did not call ahead. I did not warn anyone. I needed answers while my fear was still sharp. The place was bright and expensive. Glass walls, clean floors, nothing looked borrowed, everything looked paid for. A woman walked toward me. She smiled like she already knew me. She said my name before I spoke. She said my husband told her I might come. That confirmed everything. I asked her if she knew where the money came from. I asked if she knew the loans were in my name. I asked if she knew I was drowning in debt. She did not deny it. She said men do what they must. She said he was building a future. She said I was holding him back. Then she said something worse. She said she was pregnant. The word hit me hard. For a second, I could not breathe. Then something else surfaced in my mind. Something my mother-in-law once mentioned by accident. A medical issue from his past. I looked at her closely. I asked if he told her everything about himself. I asked if he told her the truth. Her smile faded. I told her he could not have children. I told her the doctors confirmed it years ago. I told her he hid it from everyone. She stepped back, her face drained of color. She asked me to stop lying. I told her to ask him for proof. I told her to ask for records. I told her to protect herself. I walked out without waiting for her response. In the parking lot, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother-in-law. It said we need to talk now. I stared at the screen. I knew this conversation would decide everything. And I knew she had been involved from the start. I drove straight to my mother-in-law's house. My hands stayed tight on the wheel. I did not feel fear anymore. I felt focus. She opened the door slowly. Her eyes moved past me, checking the street. She asked why I was there. Her voice shook. I walked inside without waiting for permission. I told her I knew about the loans. I told her I knew about the land. I told her I knew my husband planned everything before my mother died. She denied it at first. She said she was tired. She said grief was confusing me. She said I should rest. I took an envelope from my bag and placed it on the table. Inside was a check. I told her it was for her. I said I only wanted the truth. Her breathing changed. She stared at the envelope. Her hands trembled. She sat down. She said my husband came to her months ago. She said he asked about my mother's health. She said he wanted access. She said she helped him understand the paperwork. I asked why. She said he was her son. She said she did not want him to fail. She said she believed he would take care of me later. I asked about the loans. She lowered her head. She said she helped him find a way. She said signatures were easy to reuse. She said banks rarely check closely. I felt sick. I asked how far it went. She hesitated. Then she said something that stopped my breath. She said he had contacts at a pharmacy. She said medication can be changed quietly. She said mistakes happen. I took out my phone and placed it on the table. The recorder light was on. She noticed too late. Her face collapsed. She whispered that I was ruining everything. I picked up the check and tore it in half. I told her I already had what I came for. Behind me, the front door opened. And I knew my husband had arrived. I turned slowly. My husband stood in the doorway. His face was tight. His eyes went to the torn check in my hand, then they went to my phone on the table. He knew. He closed the door behind him. The sound was soft but final. My mother-in-law started crying. She said she did not mean for this to happen. He told her to be quiet. He asked how much I heard. I said enough. I said everything was recorded. I said the truth was no longer hidden. He smiled. It did not reach his eyes. He said recordings disappear. He said accidents happen. He stepped closer. I backed toward the table. My hand brushed my phone. I did not grab it. I did not run. I needed him to talk. He said I should have stayed silent. He said I ruined his plans. He said my mother was weak. He said she would have died anyway. That was when I slapped him. The sound cracked through the room. His smile vanished. His hand came up fast. He grabbed my wrist. His grip was tight. My mother-in-law screamed. He told her to leave the room. She ran upstairs. He leaned close to my face. He said I had one chance. He said I would give him the recording. He said we would fix this. I told him no. His eyes changed. I saw something reckless, something broken. He released my wrist and stepped back. He laughed once. He said fine. He said if I wanted war, I would get it. He opened the door and left without another word. I stood still for a long moment. My arm throbbed. My phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. It said, "You should not sleep tonight." That was when I knew this was no longer about money. It was about control. And he was losing it. I did not go home. I went to my mother's old apartment. It was the only place my husband did not control. I locked the door and turned off the lights. I sat on the floor with my phone in my hand. I listened to every sound outside. A car passing made my chest tighten. Footsteps in the hall made me hold my breath. I sent the recording to my boss. I sent copies to my email. I sent one to a friend. I needed proof to exist without me. Then I posted a short message online. I said I was safe. I said where I was staying. I did not explain more. I lay down fully dressed. I did not sleep. Near midnight, my phone rang. His name appeared on the screen. I did not answer. The ringing stopped. A message followed. He said I was destroying my own life. He said I would regret choosing strangers over family. He said I belonged to him. I blocked the number. Minutes later, I smelled smoke. At first, I thought it was from outside. Then the air grew thick. My eyes burned. I stood up fast. Smoke slid under the bedroom door. My heart dropped. I ran to the door and opened it. Heat rushed at me. The hallway was filled with fire. Flames climbed the walls. I heard his voice through the crackling noise. He called my name. He said if I came out now, we could still talk. I slammed the door shut. My hands shook. The front exit was gone. The fire was moving fast. I ran to the window. Below, people were shouting. Sirens sounded far away. I heard him laugh. He said if he could not have control, no one would. The glass began to crack from the heat. And I knew I had seconds left. I grabbed a blanket from the bed. I wrapped it around my hands. The smoke burned my throat. My eyes watered, but I stayed focused. I hit the window once. It cracked. I hit it again. The glass shattered and fell to the street below. Cold air rushed in. I climbed onto the ledge. The heat behind me pushed me forward. I could hear the fire roaring. I could hear him shouting outside. I lowered myself slowly. My grip slipped. I dropped hard onto the awning below. Pain shot through my legs, but I stayed conscious. Hands reached up and pulled me down. Neighbors dragged me away from the building. Someone wrapped a jacket around my shoulders. Behind us, the apartment burned bright. Flames poured from the windows. Smoke filled the sky. I saw him near the entrance. He held an empty gas can. His face twisted when he saw me alive. Sirens screamed closer. Police cars slid to a stop. Fire trucks followed. He tried to run. Two men from the crowd tackled him to the ground. He fought and screamed. He shouted my name like a curse. The police pulled him up. They forced his hands behind his back. He kept yelling that I ruined him. He said this was my fault. Firefighters rushed past me. They battled the flames. The building groaned and cracked. An officer knelt beside me. He asked if I was hurt. I nodded. I could not speak yet. I watched as they put my husband into the car. Our eyes met once. There was no fear on his face. Only hate. As the car door slammed shut, I realized something terrifying. This was not the end. It was only the moment he was stopped. I spent the night at the hospital. Smoke filled my lungs. My hands were burned. An officer stayed nearby the entire time. They questioned me before sunrise. I told them everything. The loans, the forged signatures, the land, the recording, the fire. I gave them my phone. I gave them copies of the confession. I gave them names. They listened closely. They did not interrupt. By morning, detectives returned. They said my husband was in custody. They said the gas can matched residue at the fire. They said witnesses saw him pour fuel. They said this was no longer a domestic dispute. It was arson. It was attempted murder. They asked about my mother. I told them about the medication change. I told them about the pharmacy contact. I told them about my mother-in-law's confession. Their faces changed. They said an investigation was already opening. Later that day, I was taken to give a formal statement. My mother-in-law was questioned separately. She did not deny it this time. The salon owner was questioned. Financial records were frozen. Accounts were locked. My husband requested a lawyer. He refused to speak. 2 days later, I learned the full list of charges. Arson. Attempted murder. Identity fraud. Financial abuse. Conspiracy. Bail was denied. I sat alone when I heard that. I felt no relief. I felt a deep, quiet stillness. That night, I received one message. It was from his lawyer. It said my husband wanted to speak with me. He said he was ready to explain everything. I stared at the screen for a long time. I knew better than to believe him. But I also knew this conversation mattered. Because men like him do not explain. They threaten. And whatever he wanted to say next could change everything. I agreed to meet him, not alone. Detectives arranged it. A glass wall separated us. Guards stood nearby. He entered in an orange uniform. His hands were cuffed. He looked smaller, but his eyes were sharp. He smiled when he saw me. He said I looked tired. He said this was hard on both of us. I told him to talk. He said the fire was a mistake. He said he only wanted to scare me. He said I pushed him too far. He said I should have listened. I asked about the loans. He said money was temporary. He said debt can disappear. He said prison does not. I asked about my mother. His smile slipped for half a second. He said she was sick already. He said timing was not his fault. That answer was enough. I stood up to leave. He leaned forward fast. He said I should stop the investigation. He said I could still fix this. He said family matters should stay private. I told him there was no family left. His face changed. The calm broke. He said if I testified, people would get hurt. He said accidents happen outside courtrooms too. The guard stepped closer. I told him everything was recorded. I told him threats only made it worse. He laughed once. He said recordings do not stop consequences. I walked out without looking back. That night, detectives moved me to a protected location. They said there were risks. They said my husband still had contacts. I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Near dawn, an officer knocked on the door. He said they found something new. He said it was about my mother's medical records. He said the timeline did not match natural causes. And he said they were reopening her death as a criminal case. The trial began faster than I expected. The charges were stacked. The courtroom stayed full every day. I sat behind the prosecutor. My husband sat at the defense table. He did not look at me anymore. The evidence came first. Bank records, forged documents, loan approvals tied to my name. The recording from my mother-in-law played in full. Her voice shook as it filled the room. She admitted helping him. She admitted knowing about the land. She admitted the pharmacy contact. The jury watched closely. Then the fire footage played. Security cameras from nearby buildings showed him carrying the gas can. Witnesses testified they saw him pour fuel. A firefighter explained how the fire spread. He said the bedroom was the only escape. He said timing saved my life. Next came the medical expert. He spoke clearly. He said my mother's medication dosage was altered. He said the change accelerated cardiac failure. The room went silent. The defense tried to argue coincidence. They said stress caused mistakes. They said no one could prove intent. Then I was called to testify. I stood, I faced the jury. I told the story from the beginning. The dinner, the funeral, the debts, the threats, the fire. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I finished and sat down. My husband finally looked at me. There was nothing left in his eyes. No control, no power. Only fear. The judge dismissed the jury for deliberation. Hours passed. When they returned, everyone stood. The foreman read the verdict. Guilty on every count. My husband lowered his head. I closed my eyes. For the first time since my mother died, the weight on my chest lifted. But I knew one thing. Justice does not erase damage. It only ends the danger. The judge spoke without emotion. Each word landed hard. My husband was sentenced to 25 years in state prison. No early release. He did not react. He stared straight ahead. The guards moved closer. The judge listed the crimes again. Arson, attempted murder, identity fraud, financial abuse, conspiracy. The courtroom stayed silent. When it was over, the guards took him away. He did not look back. The door closed behind him. I stayed seated until the room emptied. My body felt weak, but my mind was clear. The danger was finally contained. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. Cameras flashed. Questions followed. I did not answer. I walked past them. That night, I returned to my mother's apartment. The fire damage was still visible. Walls were blackened. Windows were boarded. I sat on the floor where I once drank tea with her. I let the quiet settle. A knock came at the door. My heart tightened for a second, then I stood and opened it. It was my boss. He said the investigation into my mother's death was complete. He said the pharmacy employee confessed. He said charges were filed. He said my husband's sentence would not change. But the truth would be recorded. I nodded. That was enough. Before leaving, he handed me a folder. Inside were property documents. The land in Easton County was now legally mine. I closed the folder slowly. My mother did not live to see justice. But she left me something stronger than money. She left me proof. Proof that the truth always waits. And proof that I survived the man who tried to erase me. Weeks passed. The noise faded. Courtrooms emptied. Headlines moved on. My life did not rush forward. It moved carefully. I returned to my mother's apartment during the renovations. The walls were stripped. The floor was bare. The space felt fragile but honest. I sorted what survived the fire. A cracked mug, her sewing box, the locket. I kept them close. One afternoon, I heard someone enter the building. Footsteps stopped outside the door. I froze. A knock followed. I opened it slowly. My mother-in-law stood there. She looked smaller. Her coat hung loose. Her hands shook. She said she was leaving town. She said she lost everything. She did not ask for forgiveness. She handed me a document. It was a written statement. She said she added details she never told police. She said she wanted the record to be complete. I took it. I did not invite her inside. She looked past me at the empty apartment. She said my mother was a good woman. Her voice broke. Then she turned and walked away. That night I listened to the city outside the window. Cars passed, people lived, life continued. I opened the folder with the land documents. The numbers still felt unreal. I knew money would not fix the past, but it could protect the future. I contacted a builder. I told him I wanted to restore the apartment. I told him I wanted it strong. After the call, I sat alone and felt something shift. Fear was no longer leading my thoughts. Caution remained, memory remained. But fear had lost its hold. As I turned off the light, my phone buzzed once. A notification from the prison system. My husband had been transferred. The location was closer than expected. And that reminded me of one thing. Distance does not always mean safety. Renovation began quietly. Workers came and went. I stayed nearby. I did not leave the city. I did not relax. One evening, a police officer called me. He said my husband requested a message be delivered. He said the law allowed it. I said no. The officer paused. He said the message was already logged. He said I should hear it. He read it slowly. My husband claimed someone else was responsible for my mother's medication change. He claimed new evidence existed. He claimed the case was not over. The call ended. I sat still for a long time. The next day, I met with detectives. They showed me the statement from the pharmacy worker. It was signed. It was detailed. It named my husband directly. They said he was lying. But lies can still cause damage. That night, I returned to the apartment alone. The workers were gone. The lights were off. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Something felt wrong. The sewing box was open. I knew I closed it. The locket was missing. My breath slowed. I checked the bedroom. The window was unlocked. Nothing else was taken. Only that. I called the police. They searched the building. No forced entry, no witnesses. They said it could have been a worker mistake. I knew better. The locket was not valuable to anyone else. It was proof. It was blood. Later, an evidence officer called. He said a visitor log showed one name I recognized. A man who once worked for my husband. Someone released after questioning months ago. The officer said they were looking for him. I hung up and locked every door. My mother's last belonging was gone. And someone wanted to rewrite the story again. Police moved fast after my call. They questioned the workers again. They checked cameras on nearby streets. Most angles were useless. One camera caught a man leaving the building at dusk. His face was covered. His walk was familiar. The officer said the man had prior ties to my husband. He said they believed he acted alone. He said prison orders are hard to prove. That night, I did not stay in the apartment. I went to a secure location. I slept with the light on. In the morning, detectives called me in. They had found something. A pawn shop reported a silver locket. The owner thought it looked personal. The locket had not been sold. It was left behind, wrapped in cloth, no payment asked. I went with an officer to identify it. The moment I saw it, I knew it was mine. The chain was bent the same way. The scratch near the hinge was there. Inside, nothing was missing. But something was added. A folded paper sat behind the photo. It was a note. 4 words written in black ink. Blood always returns. My hands went cold. The officer took the note as evidence. He said this was intimidation. He said charges would follow. But I understood the message. This was not about the locket. It was about reminding me of my past. About fear. That evening, I received another notification. Prison visitation privileges for my husband had been suspended. An investigation was opened into outside contact. They were closing the last doors he could reach through. I held the locket in my palm that night. I knew this was the final move. And I knew the next part would decide whether the past stayed buried or tried to rise again. The investigation ended quietly. The man who took the locket was arrested. He admitted my husband promised protection that never came. He admitted the note was meant to scare me. It did not work. Prison contact was cut off completely. No calls, no messages, no visitors. My husband disappeared into the system where control meant nothing. Months later, the apartment was finished. Clean walls, strong locks, new windows. It felt solid. I moved back in alone. I placed my mother's photo on the shelf. I placed the locket beside it. I did not hide it anymore. The land settlement was finalized. The money stayed untouched. I used only what I needed: security, legal closure, stability. One evening, I stood by the window and watched the street below. People passed without knowing my story. I liked that. There was a knock at the door. I paused. I checked the camera. No one was there. I opened the door anyway. The hallway was empty. On the floor sat a small envelope. Inside was a single document. A court notice. My husband had accepted a plea related to my mother's case. He admitted involvement. He waived all appeals. The truth was now permanent. I closed the door and locked it. That night, I slept without fear for the first time in a long while. The past stayed where it belonged. Behind bars. Behind walls. Behind me. In the morning, sunlight filled the room. One stood up, held the locket, and moved forward. I did not look back. The door was finally closed. You have reached the end of the text.